Limbus Company's most recent update has brought a brand new WAW-level EGO skill into the game, and as of right before the update, there were only two sinners without an EGO of that level, Honglu and Sinclair. Now, Honglu will be the main character of the game's next canto, and his seasonal EGO has already been teased, so it would only make sense that the new skill goes to Sinclair, right? Well, I would not be asking this question if that was the case. The newest Indicant's trial EGO skill belongs to Rodion, and this skill promises to add even more power and utility to the burn team, which has already received a lot of love throughout Season 5. The skill does a lot of things, filling multiple niches at once. However, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's the best at any of them. But hey, an EGO doesn't need to hyper-specialize in one aspect to be good. Or does it? In today's video, we'll figure out if the newest EGO skill is any good by first looking at what it does and then looking at the skill through the lens of the burn team. But before we do that, you know I have to tell you that most of my viewers are not subscribed. And if you find yourself coming back to my videos or end up enjoying this one, consider subscribing. It takes just 1 second and helps me out a lot. Without further ado, let's get back to Rodion. First, we'll have to look at her kit. Indicant's trial Rodion is a 2-coin Wrath Pierce skill with a base and coin power of 8. The skill gets 4 attack weight unconditionally and gains up to 3 extra attack weight by half the highest resonance. After attack, the skill heals allies with the lowest HP percentage by 20% of their max HP. The healing hits at least one ally, as well as an additional amount of allies equal to the highest resonance. Sadly, the healing can only target up to 3 allies. Of course, even though casting the skill costs 15 SP, Rodion loses 30 more SP over 3 turns. Only the first coin of the skill actually has an effect. It inflicts 8 burn on hit and also inflicts up to 3 stacks of Searing Birdcage, based on resonance, on the main target of the skill. Even though I said that the skill does a lot of things, that's it for the awakened version of it. A weirdly small amount of text for a Season 5 WAW-level EGO skill. Before we move on to the corrosion variant of the skill and its passive, I want to go over the new Searing Birdcage effect. This effect is quite interesting, as it interacts with the game's mechanics in a way that isn't seen very often. The effect stacks up to 5 times, and if the enemy with Searing Birdcage also has burn, that enemy's wrath resistance goes up by 0.1 for every stack of the effect. Immediately, let me clear up whatever confusion this statement might create. A resistance increasing is a good thing for you, as it means the damage that you deal is multiplied by a higher number. It's a bit weird to see Resistance Plus actually make a unit more vulnerable, but that's how it works. Additionally, at turn end, the enemy with Searing Birdcage gains bind equal to the stack of the effect. The stack halves at turn end as well. No additional stacks of Searing Birdcage can be inflicted as long as any exist on the target. Now let's move to the corrosion version. This skill retains its base and coin power, as well as its attack weight. However, its coins are unbreakable now, and the offense level went up by 2. The skill still gains attack weight based on resonance, but the healing is nowhere to be found. And this time, both coins actually have some effects. The first one only activates its abilities if it doesn't crack, so you have to win a clash or hit one-sided to make use of them. It inflicts 10 burn, 1 burn count, and also Searing Birdcage, this time with a cap of 5 and not 3. The second coin deals 2% more damage for every stack of burn on the main target of the skill up to 100%. On kill, the coin applies 1 wrath power up and wrath damage up to allies. The amount of allies affected, once again, scales with the highest resonance and maxes out at 6. This effect activates once per skill. Quite an interesting corrosion, with some very notable differences from its awakening counterpart. Indicant's Trial's passive is Blazing Amusement. This effect activates when an enemy with 10 or more burn count is defeated. The effect spreads the defeated enemy's count among other enemies, but with a cap of 3 per enemy. It also heals Rodion for 8 SP. At max SP, that last effect heals the ally with the least SP for 5 SP instead. With this, we're already done with the skill itself. Now let's actually look at the ego in action. And the first thing I have to say is wow, the visuals of the skill, especially in its corrosion form, are gorgeous. If nothing else, Indicant's Trial is absolute eye candy. But let's actually talk about using it. This ego is one of the many conditional 7-weight skills that exist in the WAW-level category. However, Indicant's Trial gets a higher base weight than most, which allows the skill to be used without a long resonance chain. But as much as I want to praise the skill for this, I do have to say that it really does not make a difference, as all other major effects of the skill still require resonance, so you won't find yourself throwing this ego out for no reason 90% of the time. As for the effects themselves, the healing is pretty solid. It heals more per ally than the healing giant in Fluid Sac, but heals less per ally than Pursuance. Indicant's Trial also sits in the middle of those two egos in terms of allies targeted, with Fluid Sac targeting 6, Pursuance targeting 2, and this skill targeting up to 3. The burn infliction is nothing to scoff at for a skill with such great attack weight. Inflicting 8 burn on 6 enemies results in a total output of 48 potency. This is great for hitting conditionals of your other allies, getting value from AoE Dark Flame inflicted by Magic Bullet Otis with her skill 3 and Ego, and for increasing the power and damage of Don Sinclair's evolved skill 3. But we all know what the most interesting part of the Ego skill is. Searing Birdcage, the brand new debuff. How good is it actually? Well, sadly not that great. To understand why that is the case, let me list off some reasons. Reason number 1. Less resistance to wrath is good, but far less useful than you might think. Extra 0.5 resistance helps a lot with increasing the damage output of the skills of your identities, especially against wrath resistant enemies. However, the effect can only be inflicted on the main target of Indicant's Trial, so only one enemy. And when there's just one enemy on the field, what's Burn's win condition? That's right, Dark Flame, an effect specifically designed to allow Burn to bypass its cap and deal crazy damage to a single enemy. The problem here is that Dark Flame deals Pride damage and not Wrath, meaning it cannot take advantage of Searing Birdcage in any way. Reason number 2. Halving effects are just terrible. Even if you get 5 stacks of Searing Birdcage with the Corrosion Ego skill, you won't get to enjoy them for long. More specifically, you will not get to enjoy the actual amount of the effect you have inflicted. What's even worse is that the halving effect rounds down, meaning that 5 stacks of Birdcage after one turn transform into just 2 stacks. And if you inflict 3 stacks with the Awakening version of the skill, they'll turn into just 1 stack very quickly as well. This lowers the amount of turns in which you can actually feel the difference in the enemy's resistances. And what's even worse is that you can't restack the effect, meaning that you have to sit through a turn of the effect being useless at one stack before you can reapply it for further use. Reason number 3 is pretty predictable. Bind? Really? Inside of the burn team, literally one ID gets buffed by speed advantages, and it's Sang-Don. I'm sure we'll get more identities like her in the future, but with a new season on the horizon, that will surely not happen anytime soon, so the second half of the effect is pretty much useless. So, steering Birdcage is not very good, even though at times it can increase your damage output by a decent amount for a turn. Now, how does the corrosion variant of the skill stack up? First off, the coin effects of the skill have gotten a lot better. 10 burn inflicted on 6 enemies is fantastic, that extra burn count also allows the stack to stick, and the Searing Birdcage is inflicted in a larger amount, which at least allows you to get a meaningful buff for one turn. Sadly, the effect is still only inflicted on one enemy. The second coin, however, is a bit more interesting, as it goes against the utility nature of this ego's other effects and just straight up gets a damage buff. The buff at its maximum potential is pretty good. 100% extra damage is a strong effect. However, this is the part where I have to address the biggest weakness of Indicant's Trials corrosion variant. The sanity cost of the skill is 40 SP, and due to the fact that we're talking about a corrosion, you will have to overclock the skill to get it, thus increasing all of its costs by 50%. This includes the sanity cost of the ego, meaning that you will have to pay 60 SP to use the variant of the skill that has a damage buff. The problem here is that unlike a lot of other corrosions, this one does not get a negative coin and retains its two positive ones instead. If used at 45 SP, overclocked Indicant's Trial leaves Rodion at minus 15 SP, making flipping heads with the coins of the skill an inconsistent endeavor. And if you do low roll both coins, which will often be the case, even a maxed out damage buffing effect will not save the offensive output of Indicant's Trial. However, bonus damage is not the only thing the second coin gets, as it also has an on-kill effect that buffs allies. And of course, you already see the problem. I just said that the skill isn't good at dealing damage, and it also has an on-kill effect. Obviously, this effect will not proc very often, unless you leave enemies staggered and at very low HP before using the skill. Overall, the corrosion variant of Indicant's Trial trades the healing effect of its awakening counterpart and gets some offensive bonuses instead. But due to the nature of the ego, it struggles to make efficient use of said bonuses, meaning that it will not become a top tier damage ego. The last part of the skill that we need to analyze is its passive. And realistically, it's not going to proc too often. In multi-target encounters, enemies die before they are inflicted with 10 or more burn count. And in boss fights, once the enemy is defeated, that's it, that's the end of the encounter. The passive can proc in the mirror dungeon, where all kinds of effects are abundant, and it can heal the sanity of Don Sinclair, who usually needs as much SP healing as he can get. But here's the problem. Once again, the effect is only activated in encounters with groups of enemies. But in those kinds of encounters, Sinclair doesn't struggle with sanity anyways, as he just gets more of it from killing enemies. Overall, the passive is just a nothing burger. It's there, but you won't notice it too often, and even when it procs, it has limited impact on the outcome of the encounter. So, how good is Indicant's Trial in burn? Well, if you want to use it, you'll have to slot in Rodion into your team. Most of you likely already use her, so that's not a problem. Rodion inflicts a decent amount of burn count, but not that much burn potency compared to other IDs on the team. The newest EGO helps her with that, providing a ton of AoE burn. It also gives decent healing, which is great for Rodion, as she can now safely slot in Force Match Flame as her high-level EGO without any fear, as Pursuance is no longer your best healing option. In terms of damage, Indicant's trial is nothing special, but just because it can hit so many enemies, it's at least decent. The cost of the EGO is also quite cheap, as it only requires the most common resources in the burn team to be used. You're probably going to stick to the Awakening version just due to the fact that it has healing and can actually flip heads, unlike the Corrosion. Although you're obviously free to try to use the EGO however you want, as its two variants do a lot of different things. Overall, Indicant's trial Rodion is painfully mediocre. It truly is a jack of all trades, but a master of none. Mid damage, okay healing, good burn infliction, bad unique effect. It all averages out to a very inoffensive EGO that also really isn't a priority to get. I think pulling for this skill might be one of the worst things you can do, and sharding it is also not that great of an idea. Honestly, I would advise newer players to sit this one out, as Indicant's trial Rodion simply doesn't impact burn enough for you to spend your resources on it. With this, my overview of the newest EGO skill in Limbus Company comes to an end. If you disagree or have something to add, feel free to leave a comment below. If you enjoyed the video at any point, leave a like to let me know, and if you want to see more content like this, consider subscribing. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Goodbye!